Today's presentation is titled Counterfeit Medical Devices, Protecting Your Brand and the Public Health. I'm Courtney Stevens, Senior Attorney in the Loss Control Department at Medmarc. On behalf of today's presenter, Richard Barnes, thank you for joining us. Richard is a founding partner of Goodell DeVries and a graduate of the Georgetown University Law Center. He represents clients in complex tort, commercial, and product liability litigation, and is on Medmarc's defense panel. He has been recognized as a leading practitioner in these fields and most recently was awarded 2015's Leadership in Law Award from the Daily Record. During his career, he has represented a variety of clients in disputes involving pharmaceuticals, medical devices, patents, trademarks in the Lanham Act, antitrust, breach of contract, unfair trade practices, aviation, commercial torts, covenants not to compete, and state procurement laws. He's defended companies in federal and state court class actions in Maryland, West Virginia, Alabama, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and California. He has briefed or argued cases before the United Supreme Court and various state and federal appellate courts. He has also tried to verdict complicated multi-plaintiff product liability, pharmaceutical, and medical device cases. He is currently serving as national counsel in 2 pharmaceutical litigations involving over-the-counter medications. Some representative clients include Pfizer, Wyeth, Dentsply, Johnson & Johnson, and DePuy Orthopedics. With that, I am pleased to turn things over to Rick, who will start today's presentation.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My colleague Brian Lands is on the phone as well, and Brian may feel free to chip in as we go along and review these slides, and I appreciate Brian's participation in the preparation of these materials. So, first of all, just a brief introduction. Counterfeiting really is a major problem in the United States and really globally. We are all aware of the issues with consumer products and designer or luxury goods and how easily they're counterfeited. And we know that consumers will knowingly purchase a counterfeit consumer good or a luxury item and basically get to have the benefit of showing that they can really afford the best, even though the designer handbag or the shirt may fall apart in 6 months. That is one thing, but compare that outcome to medical products, and they're quite different. The purchaser of a medical product, such as a medical device or a pharmaceutical, is almost always duped into buying it. It's an unknowing purchase. And it places the consumer at risk not only of an ineffective treatment, but perhaps even injury and a really bad outcome. Some of the products fail or can even be toxic. So for this group of, I would say that the public health implications of counterfeiting are really important, not only to you, but to the federal courts and the various governmental actors that are involved in policing counterfeiting. You can look at it a couple of ways, obviously, the loss of revenue and goodwill that is associated with counterfeiting. But for your industry, we really need to focus also on the impact on the public health. Detection of counterfeiting is extremely difficult, and the world is awash in counterfeit goods, as the upcoming presentation will demonstrate. So the purpose of my presentation today is to raise awareness among medical device and healthcare companies, and to hopefully assist you all in addressing the problem or developing strategies to address the problem. So the first slide here really talks about the different avenues of counterfeit, medical device counterfeiting. On the left side is a matter involving counterfeit contact lenses, and on the right is counterfeit blood glucose test strips. On the left is a civil action that was instituted, and on the right is a criminal action. And we'll basically go through some of the considerations as to which track you take or both. But there's an important point here in the Johnson & Johnson matter, and that is the importance of really having independent third-party monitoring and investigations of the market place and then testing the products in the field to see if they are in fact counterfeit. So having a strategy or technology in place to monitor for counterfeits and supply chain issues is really a key component of combating counterfeiting. And here's the choice that companies face, and it's a tough choice. Combating counterfeiting is very expensive and time-consuming, and not only requires the assistance of counsel and third-party investigators to gather intelligence on the supply chain, et cetera, but also it requires company resources and staffing to assist in this effort. So that's one choice, and it's an expensive proposition for you. But the other choice is do nothing, and the consequence of that, especially for medical device and healthcare companies, is counterfeits erode your brand. It hurts your revenue, and as we've discussed, really raises some important public health issues. So that's really the choice that we're faced with, and more companies are really investing in their resources in combating counterfeiting, even though it's certainly an expensive, time-consuming proposition. So going on to the next slide, this is the counterfeit blood glucose test strips manufactured by Johnson & Johnson, one of their operating companies. And as you see here, the counterfeit's quite good, and the counterfeiting, and there's a case citation if you want to get the details, but these products originated in either Pakistan and or China, and they use the trademark One Touch that is a trademark that's owned by Johnson & Johnson. Counterfeits can be very well made, and developing nations like Pakistan or advancing or pretty sophisticated industrial nations like China can easily acquire the means to counterfeit products very cheaply. So on the counterfeit contact lens case, how did it come to light? Well, customers were complaining of the quality of the lenses. The contacts were allegedly contaminated with hazardous bacteria, and it created a risk for the patients that's somewhat obvious. On the Johnson & Johnson side, the worldwide, this could be deadly if the glucose monitoring test strips were unreliable. Obviously, that could result in a pretty serious outcome for a diabetic. So both of these had instances involved very serious potential side effects for the consumer. So those are two examples that are fairly prominent, and they've reached prominence because of the fact of the potential for duping doctors and patients into a purchase that could actually not only be ineffective but harmful. So now let's address the scope of the problem, and the scope is international, and there are many stakeholders to this issue. There are many different laws and conventions that must be considered. There's an interface between copyright law, trademark law, and then various statutory and common law remedies, depending upon where the counterfeiting is taking place. So, who are the stakeholders? Well, you can see here, the United Nations is involved. Obviously, our Food and Drug and customs agencies, the Centers for Disease Control, international police organizations like Interpol, World Health Organization, trade groups, the TGA and Health Canada, the European health agencies as well. So it is a coordinated effort, and it doesn't take much to just Google certain things, and you'll get numerous reports in the media concerning the problem of counterfeiting. One of the things that I think is interesting and very important to understand is, why is it a coordinated effort internationally? And the revenue from counterfeiting, as we'll discuss in a minute, is quite large, and it is linked to many forms of organized crime, drug trafficking, and even terrorism. So there's a huge amount of interest to shutting this down wherever it happens, because it's really an illicit trade, and like many forms of illicit trade, it leaks into some really serious things that obviously we all want to prevent. So these are just some examples in the news. Most of the news, frankly, involves, in the healthcare industry, involves the counterfeit prescription drugs, because that has really been at the forefront and is a major, major problem. So it's garnered most of the publicity. And these are just some of the, every year, you can see a major news piece on this. Many of the big pharmaceutical companies are very active. I know Pfizer is, Bayer is, J&J is, but they're out to not only combat their own problems with counterfeiting, but to raise awareness among the consumers and the healthcare providers as well, that this is something that needs to be people need to be aware of. So let's talk about the bottom line to some of the companies. So with regard to medical devices, as I said, it's an international issue. And in 2010, the World Health Organization estimated that more than 8% of medical devices in circulation are counterfeit. That may be undercounted. The FDA has been very active in this area and enlisted 115 countries to combat the online sale and distribution of counterfeit and illegal medical products. Over 2,400 websites have been shut down, and they've received $81 million in illegal medicines and medical devices worldwide. That's a drop in the bucket, frankly, right? And so in 2008, 2015, the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations seized more than $172 million in unlawful medical products. That's just what we caught. And this is beyond the scope of the presentation, but the effort that the customs officials of our country use to try to capture and deter counterfeit materials, into the goods into this country is really impressive. But they'll be the first to admit that there's a flood of counterfeits entering our marketplace. So let's talk about the number of seizures. As I said, 8% of the seizures were pharmaceuticals and personal care products. They don't really define pharmaceuticals that strictly, so some of that could actually be medical devices. The seizures of counterfeit medical devices and pharmaceutical products, is valued in the tens of millions of dollars every year, and more than half of these products, we believe, or we being our country believes, originate from China. It's a major problem out of China. So the total value of seized counterfeit goods surpassed $1 billion last year. Now that's all counterfeit goods. That gives you a sense of how pervasive it is. And then we have the 6% figure for pharmaceuticals and personal care products. The street value, again, being over tens of millions of dollars. Again, the numbers represented here are simply the seizures and not the total amount that are entering this country. So the source economies by manufacturer's suggested retail price. So look at the countries that are involved with this. China obviously is a huge player. Hong Kong, Singapore, India, the UK, Korea, United Arab Emirates, Italy, Malaysia, even our good northern neighbor, Canada. So there are lots of issues here that that need to be addressed, and there's a heck of a lot of interaction with all of these countries, even China, to try to get their handle on this. One of the issues that we have globally is that many of the source countries that are facilitating counterfeiting don't really have mature regulatory bodies to work with. So that really impedes the ability to interdict the counterfeit goods. Another issue that we have is a lot of the source ingredients or component parts for pharmaceuticals and medical devices actually originate in China and some of these markets here. So separating, the wheat from the chaff is a problem facing U.S. companies, and so many of our component parts and ingredients are outsourced to places like China, India, and Korea. So to give you an example of how dire the problem is, malaria drugs, for example, are sent to developing nations where the controls are not robust, shall we say. And so take malaria drugs. A huge percentage of the malaria drugs in the developing world are fake or substandard and are believed to originate in China or India. And so this is a huge issue, public health issue, where people are taking these either to treat malaria or to prevent the onset, and they have basically an inert drug, and which can lead to the infection. So moving ahead here, you can see some of the numbers here on the suggested retail price of what we're seeing in terms of the amounts of money at stake here for American industry. So I want to spend a little time on the health, safety, and security aspect again. One of the things that I would like to alert you to is that the component parts, such as electronics, that may be incorporated into medical devices are not necessarily tracked and traced to medical devices or tracked in these data. So one of the aspects that I think all of our companies need to be concerned about is their supply chain and where are the component parts coming from and how rigorous the sampling and the inspections are as they come into your company. I've had experience with that, and it's really quite in terms of product liability exposure, that's one of the major concerns, is that if companies are not aware of their supply chain and are not taking steps to sample and control it, that is a potential source for liability to the customer. It's one of the few areas of risk that I see for you in from a product liability point of view. So let's go beyond the bottom line, some of the financials we just talked about. But what are the consequences? Well, here are what we're really faced with. Obviously, the potential health risks to the consumers, potential legal liability, negative branding, revenue loss, theft of your valuable intellectual property, loss of goodwill and consumer confidence in your products, threat to your innovation, loss of tax revenue to our government, defrauding of health plans, and just the resources. If I had to rank these, I would say, that in terms of the concerns would be potential health risks to consumers and the negative consequences for your brand, and then obviously protecting your intellectual property and goodwill. So here's some fast facts from counterfeiting. I would like to call them fun facts when I deal with my children, but I don't think these are particularly fun here. If we go through some of these facts, the WHO has found that the majority of counterfeit drugs contain no active ingredient, or the wrong one, and or the wrong amount, all of which are significant from a liability and public health point of view. Pfizer has published that at least 60 different of its products are being counterfeited around the world. And if you go beyond Pfizer, there are 920 medical products that have been reported to be substandard or spurious or falsely labeled in 2016 by the WHO. As many as 1 million people die annually from ingesting counterfeit drugs. Now, we don't have that number for medical devices, but some of them have been found to have rat poisoning, brick dust, boric acid, floor polish, paint, inkjet material, and obviously infestation with bacteria or other harmful organisms. Counterfeit drugs are a $431 billion industry. We were unable to find a similar figure for medical devices, but you can almost be assured that it's in the tens of billions. And they're increasing at a rapid rate as the world becomes flatter and the internet is available and people are becoming more sophisticated. We can only expect that the problem will actually increase over time. And if you go back 20 years and just see the increase, it's just dramatic. And lastly, some of the distribution channels, the available online pharmacies and distribution is really a key avenue for distributing counterfeit products into the United States and into the world. So we mentioned the one product liability implication that I worry about, and that's your supply chain, the lack of detection, and when you're not following your own procedures rigorously, or the things that slip through, can create some product liability risk. And that really goes to your good manufacturing practices and your quality control. There's one published case out of West Virginia involving Lipitor, and the plaintiffs basically argued that Pfizer failed to institute reasonable safeguards against counterfeit Lipitor products entering the stream of commerce, and that the risk of counterfeit proliferation was well known. So that's the theory I mentioned. But Pfizer prevailed in this case. So what were the theories? The theories were strict liability, breach of warranty, fraud, and negligence. And strict liability is a theory of liability which says if the product is defective because it's unreasonably dangerous. There are various tests to determine if a product is subject to strict liability standards. They won't go into that. The claim was also breach of an express warranty or implied warranty, fraud, and negligence. Negligence is a reasonable care standard. So Pfizer prevailed on this in this case as a matter of law because it wasn't documented that it was aware of the counterfeit scheme, and in fact, why would any company want to be a participant in promoting diminishment of its brand and goodwill? Secondly, the fraud claim was dismissed because there was no representation made about the counterfeit product by Pfizer, and Pfizer only made representations about genuine Lipitor, so the fraud claim was dismissed. And in the negligence claim under West Virginia law, a person does not have a duty to protect others from deliberate criminal conduct of third parties. But however, some special relationships can be imposed. So the concern from a product liability standpoint is really failing to follow your own procedures for inspection and control of your supply chain. Because once you have obviously you have your own good manufacturing practices, documentation that's necessary, and that's really where from my experience, where the liability might arise. So this is a little bit more about this case here. So protecting your trademark is really a key part of your job in any organization, and it's really how one of your most valuable assets. So this might be repeating some elementary aspects of trademark law, but let's just go through it quickly. A trademark is a brand name used to identify and distinguish the goods and services of one seller or provider from those of another, and to indicate the source of the goods and services. So your brand, the quality of your products, and the source of the goods all are represented by your trademark. So it allows consumers, or in your case, doctors or consumers, to differentiate between products and know what they're getting. So the public policy behind trademarks is really to protect the consumer, the users. And this is different from a patent or a copyright, which inures to the benefit of the owner. Here, the trademark allows me to know if I'm purchasing Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola. If that might be important, but it can be really important as to healthcare products, because the risks and benefits associated with each product are usually unique, and the trademarks really help doctors and consumers choose wisely. So it's a source identification function is really the purpose of a trademark. So why would someone be? I think I jumped to here. So what is a counterfeit? Well, a counterfeit is what the law calls a spurious mark that is identical with or substantially indistinguishable from a mark that is registered in the United States Patent Office. So it's one that's close or the same. So here are some examples that we just picked up to show you just how good some of these fakes are. And we've seen some really good counterfeits. Unregistered marks cannot form the basis of a counterfeiting claim, but they can form the basis of other remedies, such as a common law trademark infringement claim or unfair competition. So, just simply stated, someone else can sell the same product, but they simply can't sell it as yours. It's not illegal to purchase a counterfeit product. And in fact, people go overseas all the time knowing they're going to pick up a Ralph Lauren whatever, or some fancy handbag at a fraction of the U.S. cost, and they can bring them into this country. Now they can't resell them, but usually people walk right into this country with counterfeits every day. Go back one. So why would they want to counterfeit your mark? Well, your trademark is a valuable asset, and the counterfeiters know it. So what they want to do is basically trade on your brand. It's a favorable risk reward. Penalties are lenient, and profit margins are really high if they get away with it. And they understand that the chances of detection are relatively small. So they can trade on the difference between the value of your brand and the cost of doing a knockoff. And it's that difference that is the profit that they capture. And it's really profit and revenue that should be going to your company. So that's the entire motivation. So what's the gray market? You hear about gray market. Well, that's an enormous problem as well. Some companies take it more seriously than others. So basically, gray market goods are legal, non-counterfeit goods, but that are sold outside of the normal and intended distribution channels set up by the manufacturers. Usually the entities that are distributing these products have no relationship with the producer of the goods. So here are some examples, and there are many forms of gray market activity or parallel market activity involving goods. But a company X will manufacture a prescription medication. It's branded and sold in countries outside the United States. It could be identical to the United States branded product, and when it enters the U.S. gray market, but it's resold at a much lower price because they purchased it overseas at a significant discount. So this is just one way of that gray market products get into this country. But gray market can also consist of secondhand sale of parts that get into the stream of commerce. Another way gray market activity occurs, which is a fairly big problem, is it can include a product that a company makes for use in a developing nation, and that product may actually not meet the standards of the U.S. product, but in all other ways be, identical. And so what happens is I'll give you an example. A product is manufactured by an American company for use in, let's say, South America, and the trademark is the company's trademark. And then people, they basically flip it back into this country. They sell it over the internet or bring it through in unauthorized channels. And some doctors will gladly use, or people will gladly purchase, the cheaper non-U.S. brand. Now, companies don't like it not only because of the difference in pricing, but also perhaps it's different in quality or different in standards that are available. So that's another way gray market products can occur, and something that many companies fight vigorously. But I'd say some companies are not as aggressive on this channel of distribution. So it's an interesting question for me as to what motivates a company to actually attack this problem and not another. So I thought that I would just go through a case study that I'm going to change the names to protect the innocent, but just kind of how we get involved in what a case actually looks like. So the names have been changed to protect the manufacturer. But so going to the case study, it is an interesting case because we're still actually working on aspects of it. But we identified a seller who was a recent immigrant, and we believe there was a network of people from this country, and they were involved in selling counterfeits through the United States into Eastern Europe. It was a significant amount of product. The person was approached and received a cease and desist letter. The person agreed to comply, but less than 6 months later, we traced a product to her. She was willfully not complying with the agreement, and she and her colleagues continued to send the product into in commerce. The product at issue is a highly engineered medical device, provides a lot of value, and is invasive. So it was a big deal. The goal the second time around was not only to shut her down and really go after her, but also find out where she was getting it, the source, pull the thread as far back as we could, and stop the activity, which we believe is coming from China. So we have gone after this entity with every sort of civil penalty, seizure, remedies, which I'll discuss, and the ultimate goal, which we're concerned with, is not so much monetary recovery, but it's basically finding the source, because it's a fairly important product to doctors and patients, and the product was clearly, although it was a very good counterfeit, I'll get to that in a minute, was clearly substandard. So we basically, the doctor, this was a well-credentialed doctor in Europe. The product failed, caused significant injury to the patient. It just didn't feel the same in his hands. The widget company got a report, and we actually got a sample, And we determined that not only did the widget bear our trademark, but it was made to the naked eye to look just like our highly engineered product with some very small exceptions that only under scanning electron microscopy and microscopic examination could we verify. So step one, to get you need to gather the evidence and maintain the chain of custody from the doctor to the courtroom. So you obtain the device from the end user. You get all invoices and documentation from the end user. You trace it through each and every distributor. Sometimes you go through several steps in the distribution process to get it into some, city in Europe. And then you pull together all the information relevant to the origination and the chain of commerce of that particular product. So this is time-consuming, but absolutely necessary to establish a case of counterfeiting should you have to go into litigation. Step two is you have to establish the device is actually counterfeit and prove it's not your product. So you analyze the packaging, you compare the images of the trademarks, you analyze the device. Again, the telltale sign was not only the trademark, but we could tell that on the business end of this device, there were critical differences that placed the patient at risk. We compared it to our own records. We demonstrated the differences between legitimate inventory and then the legitimate modes of distribution. So that's really, again, pulling each and every thread, kicking over the rocks, and making sure you have your evidence in place. Step three, we have to then, once we got the distribution in Europe, we had to trace it back to the criminal and really go all the way back. And here we were able to do this with the help of our doctor, the European distributors, and we were able to trace it right back into the United States and quickly identify who the culprit was back in business, which, by the way, is not uncommon. So what do we do next? Well, you identify the marks that are infringed. You make sure you have those marks registered in the United States, and then you're faced with a decision: do you want to avoid or commence civil litigation? So, avoiding civil litigation, there's all sorts of civil litigation. You can send a cease and desist letter. You can contact the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations. You can contact the U.S. Attorney's Office, and obviously you can contact Customs. And there are several statutes under 18 U.S.C. involving the trafficking of counterfeit goods. But the first step here, when you go to these authorities, is to demonstrate you have really strong IP and supply chain practices, and that you have the counterfeiter dead to rights. So considerations is, as to whether or not you want to go through the litigation route or another route, is cease and desist letters in government interaction may actually eliminate the source of surprise. These people that are engaged in this activity are in fact criminal, and in our most recent case is an example of the high rate of recidivism, shall we say. It gives them time to conceal or destroy counterfeit goods they may have on site or in their control, as well as the related documentation tracing the product back to its source, back to China, for example. So, and it's uncertain how quickly the government will even move. So, those are some of the considerations that you would need to consider. Sometimes, cease and desist letters do work, but I'm a little skeptical as to the long-term effectiveness of cease and desist letters, because the people can reorganize or just get shell companies or other people to stand in their place, but still conduct the unlawful enterprise. So protecting your IP, there's both the legal component and the business component. They have to work together. The lawyers that you work with, either inside or outside, have to have the support of the business. We need your resources, your technical expertise, and access to your marketing and your distribution. So what I would say here is, and this is a day-long discussion, but supply chain and distribution security are key. That has to be a business decision. There should be procedures in place to monitor and protect the brand, your ingredients, your components. Maintaining your intellectual property, your trademark presence by registrations here and abroad is key. Supply chain has to be monitored consistently. Many companies have a head of security and have security protocols in place. There are third-party vendors who monitor the field and internet sites for you. There are technologies for packaging and various high-tech ways of verifying that authentic products in the field. These are specific to different medical devices, and there's no one-size-fits-all, but these are some of the things that the business needs to get behind if the legal machinery is going to be effective in protecting your brand and your trademarks against counterfeiters. So commencing litigation, infringement of a registered mark, unfair competition, trademark dilution of a famous mark that is distinctive, false designation of origin, and common law trademark infringement. All these are the standard claims. It's beyond the scope of this brief presentation, but briefly, infringement of a registered mark prohibits the use of a counterfeit in connection with the sale, distribution of any good or service in a manner that is likely to cause confusion or cause mistake or to deceive. That's the critical phrase. Unfair competition protects a mark that's not registered in the United States, but is basically designed to cause confusion in the marketplace as to source or origin. Your trademark's valuable. You don't want your trademark diluted. I've had cases where famous marks have been used on pornographic websites. That's always an interesting day in court, but that shows you just how careful you need to be in monitoring the internet, because that can really cause any use of a famous mark by an unauthorized way can really dilute the value of the mark and cause you serious damage in the marketplace. Remedies, again, we can go through this very quickly, but obviously you want to shut it down. You want to get injunctive relief. So that's a major issue here. I'll come back to these in a minute if I have time. So let's just go to the considerations when considering litigation. First of all, make sure the owner of the infringed mark is named as a plaintiff. A lot of companies own their intellectual property through affiliates and not through the operating company. So be careful to have the right plaintiff in the caption. Request the temporary restraining order to include a gag order, basically preventing any communication between the defendant and third parties to avoid concealment or destruction of the evidence, which is critical to your case. Expedited discovery, you want this thing to move quickly. And then there's this interplay, this seeking injunctive relief against third parties acting in concert with or in participation with the defendants. This is Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 65D2. And this primarily is used by trademark holders to shut down internet sites and internet domain names to protect the goodwill of the mark. So you need to go after the aiders and abettors who may be, in fact, innocent, but you need to put them on notice that their sites and their services are being used to facilitate a counterfeiting activity. And courts, if you have the right record, will actually extend the injunction to third parties, and that's a critical part of your protection. So the equitable remedies are key. You really want to move quickly. So just briefly, an injunction is an equitable remedy in the form of a court order that compels a party to do or refrain from doing certain activities. So basically, you get the court to tell the defendant, the offending party, to knock it off, and you do it with the form of a very draconian court order. What you need to show is that money damages are inadequate and that the court failing to grant an injunction would cause your company irreparable harm. I mean, attorneys know all of this stuff, but the point is you need to create that record to allow the court, who usually wants to help you, shut this down and shut it down quickly. So it's what you ask the court to do. Temporary restraining orders are great because they are granted quickly. It's ex parte, and you can really get the jump on the other side and basically preserve the status quo, seize the evidence, permits you to seize the evidence and the documents to make out your full case. That to me, usually if you get the TRO granted or a preliminary injunction granted, usually the other side will come to terms with you. You actually want to seize the counterfeit goods to get them out of the stream of commerce. And you want to shut them down. I mean, you really want to try to shut them down. This is the issue that involves sometimes working with local and foreign authorities to accomplish this. And this is expensive, requires cooperation of third parties in overseas, usually China. China's where I have my experience. But you really do need to go beyond our borders to find the source and shut it down. So I've gone a little bit over, but we've left 10 minutes for questions. So if anyone would like to ask me any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. We're going to now begin the Q&A section. If you have a question, please feel free to submit it using the Q&A panel located at the bottom right of your screen. After typing your questions in the space at the bottom, hit the send button. Please be sure to direct your questions to all panelists in the Ask menu, and your questions will not be seen by other members of the audience. So we've got one here. This person wants to know, Rick, generally, how often are manufacturers successful in recovering any of their economic injury costs against counterfeiters?
I would say not very often. There are instances, obviously every case is different, but most of these people are not well capitalized. They are criminals. Much of this, the money leaves our shores quickly. So my experience is that the business objective usually is to shut it down, get to the source, and that the monetary recoveries generally are secondary.
Okay, thank you. Another question. If, after determining your products are being counterfeit, you choose to proceed by informing government agencies, which agency would you choose and why?
There are two that I would recommend. One would be the Food and Drug Administration. They have an office, and then the local U.S. attorney. There's a liaison at the Department of Justice as well that you can go to first. But those two agencies seem to be the point of interest for medical device companies.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, they seem to be most inclined to act quickly, and certainly if there's a sufficient public health issue, you'll get the attention more quickly.
Okay, great. Looks like we have one more question here. Let me just pull it up now. Do you have any suggestions for getting enforcement in China?
Yes, I do. Enforcement in China requires there are law firms and there are organizations in China that will assist us. You need really good intelligence to find the source. There are ways that the laws in China also have an interface with copyright laws, which may help you shut down the trademark. But generally, the one experience I had in China involved really gathering intelligence with the help of a private organization there that's their business. The Chinese authorities, I can't say I'm an expert dealing with them, but there are law firms, and there are vendors in China that will help facilitate shutting it down. But you really need to, just like in the United States, all the things I said about evidence are equally important in China. Even getting pictures, taking photographs of the cars in the parking lot, because these organizations can move. They're very sophisticated people, so they can move their operations. So you'll actually really have to have boots on the ground in some capacity to trace it, because they can reorganize and they can move.
Okay. Another question here, Rick. How do you address situations where the aiders or abettors who offer an eBay-like sales platform say that they're merely providing an online service and therefore not directly engaging in IP or trademark infringement?
Well, that's an emerging area of the law, and basically you need to establish that the counterfeiters are actually using their services, put them on notice that you've traced it to their site, and that in fact they are abetting the counterfeiters. This is a highly controversial area, because the internet companies are going to may fight you, right? So I don't know if I know that Brian has looked at that. Brian, do you want to help me address your experience with that?
Yeah, I'm here. I wrote an article, actually, it's published on our blog, that goes into a little bit more detail on this. But, I mean, I don't have any much more to say than what you said, except for what I wrote in the article. But you can stop websites such as eBay, as you said. Another thing is website optimization companies, which is really what I've concentrated on. So I haven't necessarily looked into the sort of the financial vendors that you're talking about in the question. But we do have some experience with shutting down website optimization companies, and there's a bunch of case law out there on that, specifically in the federal courts in New York, that I can either send whoever's asking the question or we can discuss later.
Yeah, there's some tension between the internet access and the law. I think the case law will basically help if you have a bona fide case of counterfeiting, that cyber squatting is something that I think it's becoming remedies are becoming more effective as time goes on, but sometimes the internet companies will resist unless you have the evidence you need.